at the forefront of politics.
Our enemy is Trump. He is the enemy. We got to unite. If we're not a united party, we lose to Trump.
On the front lines of activism.
There's certain fights, if we don't engage, they win. This is a fundamental question of who we are.
And delivering your daily dose of comedy.
Donald Trump, when he had his physical, they had his blood pressure, and mine is higher than his.
Oh.
And the irony is mine is higher because of him.
From the blue wave.
We flipped enough seats to take control of the House. We control the House.
To 2020 and beyond. This is the Dean Obeidallah Show on Sirius XM Progress, Channel 127.
And welcome to the show, brothers and sisters. Monday, November 11th. I'm Dean Obeidallah. We are live here the next 3 hours. I hope you had a nice weekend. Hope you had some fun, recharged, because it's a big week. It's impeachment week, public hearings later in the week. We're going to be covering that a lot. I had a good time. I enjoy going on Joy Reid's show, and she was back Saturday. So to me, it's like fun. So I was on there. We talked about, as you would imagine, impeachment. And then Saturday night, I spoke at the 20th anniversary of the Council on American Islamic Relations, or dinner in D.C. And it was really cool because our friend Elena Sarsour, who's been on here and even before when it was Mark's show, was the MC. And then Ilhan Omar, the congresswoman, was also a speaker. So it was really great to see Muslims from around the country excited. Ghazala Hashmi, who that name might not sound familiar, but if you listen Friday, she was on. She made history last Tuesday, being the first Muslim woman to ever be elected to the state Senate in Virginia. So I met her in person. I only had her on the show before. So it's an exciting time. You know, I think for so many minority communities, there's a sense of both excitement and apprehension at the same time looking at 2020. Because every other conversation is, we're going to destroy Trump. And others like, do you think we can really beat him? And everyone should be concerned. Can we beat Trump? Because you have to go into this being worried that maybe we can't beat him. Forget the polls. Get out, get involved. That's the way. Fight like we're down a few points. Fight like we did in 2018. Come out in huge numbers. And then we win. That's it. In fact, the magic number right now, 358. 358 days to the most important election of our lives. November 3rd, 2020. That is Judgment Day for this nation. And I dare say for a generation. Because if he were to win again, how he will change this nation and what he's done already with destroying the rule of law, the Constitution, checks and balance, just like a king ruling by pen, and what he will do to the federal courts for a generation of right-wing Christian Sharia law-loving people he will appoint. That should be enough right there. Also, it's Veterans Day, so I want to say thank you for your service to our veterans. I don't care if you're a Trump supporter or the most person on the left, everyone who ever served in our nation, I thank you for your service. And I always wonder if I would have the courage to serve. I always wonder. We're not going to answer. I'm too old now, I think. So, look, it's impeachment week. We will be talking about it later in the show. Wednesday, two key people are testifying. The first one's extremely important. Bill Taylor, the career diplomat, the man who graduated West Point, served in Vietnam as an infantry officer in the 101st Airborne, and really is making the opening statement for the impeachment of Donald Trump. And that's why Adam Schiff, former federal prosecutor, is calling him first. He is really going to be, because everyone knows that first witness is the most likely everyone will watch. After that, who knows? People make up their mind like a jury. Studies have shown that juries make up their mind huge percentages in the opening statement. When I used to try cases, we knew that. Like, if you lose him in the opening statement, it's really hard to get him back. That's going to be the opening statement. There'll also be a testimony of George Kent, who he's almost filling in some of the blanks to make the case. And then Friday, the person that I keep telling you is the key in that we have to understand the why behind that, and that is the former U.S. ambassador to the Ukraine, Marie Yovanovitch, who Giuliani and his buddies last summer, not this summer, last summer, were paying Republicans and Congressman Pete Sessions at the time to get rid of her. So, and it's interesting, I spoke to former prosecutors and others on Saturday at MSNBC in the green room about their theory that we put out. We had the discussion right here about the idea of why do they want Yovanovitch out? And a year ago, and they all said it's about money there, and that it's about money. That's the whole thing. So we'll talk about that in the next hour. We'll touch on that in the third hour a lot with Midwin Charles, what's going on. But there's something I want to talk about that is not getting much coverage in the press, and I feel compelled to talk about it. It is something that touches me and many minority communities personally And it might not seem like the biggest deal at first, but to me, it says a bigger picture about our Democratic Party and where we are. What happened today is Congressman Peter King from Long Island, he's been there for 14 terms, announced he was retiring. Peter King, before I go through Peter King's record, I'm going to read Chuck Schumer's tweet about Peter King. And then after I read his record, I will again read his tweet and see if you see it in a different light if you're not fully familiar with Pete King. Congressman Pete King, here's what Schumer said about him today once he announced his retirement. Tweet, Peter King stood head and shoulders above everyone else. He's been principled and never let others push him away from his principles. He fiercely loved America, Long Island, and his Irish heritage, and left a lasting mark on all three, adding, I will miss him in Congress and value his friendship, period. Chuck Schumer's tweet. Nice tweet. You would think Pete King's a good guy if you just read that. Peter King is an anti-Muslim bigot. Peter King is a racist. Peter King has traded and trafficked in the worst stereotypes in this nation. Anti-LGBT, anti-black, anti-Muslim. And I'll give you some details. And this should get, and I know it's internal Democratic policy and everything's about impeachment. I get that. Here are some of the comments Peter King has said about Muslims. But it's not just Muslims, folks. Yes, that's why I know Peter King very well and written about him over the years, because he's really gone after my community for years. In 2007, Peter King said, quote, unfortunately, we have too many mosques in this country. In numerous years, 2005 and again later in 2010, repeating things saying 80 to 85% of the mosques in this country are controlled by Islamic fundamentalists, close quotes. And when pressured to give proof, he didn't give proof. He just defended it the whole time. 2010 saying things, yes, they're run by radical imams and Islamic radicals. That, of course, that was around the time of the Ground Zero Mosque, so he was playing to the right-wing fervor of hatred of Muslims. In fact, Peter King is why we have Donald Trump. And Peter King is the reason Donald Trump could campaign on banning all Muslims, saying Islam hates us, and win an election. It's Peter King. And let me read more about Peter King. He said that there is a real threat to the country from the Muslim community. And the only way to get to the bottom of it, to investigate, is what is happening. And then he said, even worse, when a war begins, we're all Americans. And this is after 9/11. Not right after, in the years after. He goes, but when a war begins, we are all Americans. But in this case, that's not the situation. And whether it's pressure, whether it's cultural tradition, whatever, the fact is the Muslim community does not cooperate anywhere near to the extent that it should. Those are dangerous, damning words in the years after 9/11 when we were in war. To say that Muslims are not cooperating, that 80 to 85% of our mosques are run by essentially Al-Qaeda, and that there are too many mosques in this country. What Peter King did after that, though, was then, and why I say Peter King is really the bridge to where we are today, is there's been Republicans and fringe people saying this garbage for years. What Peter King did as chairman of the Homeland Security Committee in 2011, he gave it the blessings of Congress. He was the guy leading this so that the bigots and racists would say, I'm not a bigot. Look at the congressman saying this. Peter King in 2011 had a hearing he chaired called The Extent of Radicalization in the American Muslim Community and that community's response. I went to that. I personally attended that and to write about it. And as I wrote, I went back and looked at my article from 2011. I called it the Super Bowl of Islamophobia. And there were some good moments there and horrible moments. Keith Ellison, who then was only in Congress for a few years, the first Muslim elected, people might recall, he actually broke down into tears while testifying there about an American Muslim first responder who died while trying to save people in the World Trade Center on 9/11. There was heated exchanges. Congresswoman Sheila Jackson Lee and Congressman Benny Thompson arguing in front of everyone with the chairman, with Peter King going, why won't you look into white supremacy? Peter King refused. In fact, just days before this hearing, almost foreshadowing to where we are today, a white supremacist was arrested in Washington State plotting to kill African Americans at a Martin Luther King march, Martin Luther King Day march it was. And thankfully the bomb didn't explode. Maybe if Peter King focused on white supremacy, we wouldn't have what we're having today in this country. But he didn't, because Peter King just wanted to focus on demonizing Muslims. And the irony for Peter King, or the stunning thing for him, is at this hearing where he's saying Muslims do not cooperate, the Democrats called the sheriff of L.A. County at the time, Lee Bach, who testified, Nowhere is the relationship more positive between his offices and the American Muslim community. And he went on to detail that 7 of the 10 plots by Al-Qaeda related people in the last year before were all tipped off by Muslims who went to law enforcement. So Peter King in 2011 laid the groundwork so that in the 2012 election campaign, Herman Cain and Newt Gingrich, and I've written about all of this, were the first ones on the national level to use anti-Muslim bigotry, to say Muslims want Sharia law, and that we're not loyal to this country. This is years after 9/11. But it had been percolating, and the Republican base had been marinating in anti-Muslim hate. And finally, they found someone like Peter King who gave it legitimacy, going on CNN and MSNBC. He was welcome to everywhere, doing this garbage. But it's not just my community that upsets me that Chuck Schumer would praise this guy the way he did. In 2014, when Eric Gardner was killed here in New York, Peter King said that he defended the cop and said Eric Gardner died not because of the chokehold, but because, quote, he was obese. And he said the police had no reason to know he suffered from a condition. And when in Staten Island, the grand jury considered indicting the police officer and did not, Peter King tweeted, "Thanks to Staten Island grand jury for doing justice and not yielding to outside pressure. Decision must be respected. Compassion for the Gardner family." So I had a nice line there, but praised the cop who we all watched on a video kill Eric Gardner, and he praised him. King last year defended ICE in the wake of deaths of 2 migrant children. Peter King has likened NFL athletes who took a knee, like Colin Kaepernick, to those who gave a Nazi salute. I'm not exaggerating. That's what Peter King said. In 2016, Peter King, where there's a vote in Congress on federal funding that would be, Barack Obama had an executive order that said federal funding would not be allowed to flow to any companies that discriminated against LGBT Americans. And they could not get federal funding if they were a federal contractor. Peter King voted against that. Only one of 2 Republicans in the entire state of New York. In April of this year, Peter King voted against reauthorizing the Violence Against Women Act. In May of 2019, this year, Peter King voted against the Equality Act. In June of this year, Peter King voted against the Dreamers Act. And in July, Peter King didn't even show up to vote on a resolution to condemn Donald Trump's hateful comments against Congresswomen AOC, Anna Presley, Rashida Tlaib, and Ilhan Omar when he said to them to go back. Peter King is a vile anti-Muslim bigot, a racist, a homophobe who has used his position in Congress to legitimize the worst of America, and Donald Trump has ridden that. So let me read Chuck Schumer's comments again then. After you heard all of that, here's Chuck Schumer's tweet. Peter King stood head and shoulders above everyone else. He's been principled and never let others push him away from his principles. He's fiercely loved America, Long Island, and his Irish heritage, and left a lasting mark on all 3. I will miss him in Congress and value his friendship. Chuck Schumer and Democrats, and I didn't mean to call him a Republican, that was a Freudian slip, he is a Democrat. But Democrats is old school Democrats where if you share the train ride with the guy to D.C. on the Amtrak Acela and you're going to overlook all their bigotry and racism because you're still friends at the end of the day and you have coffee and have lunch in the congressional gym or something, that's gone. Those days are gone. So for him to praise a man whose record on everything from Eric Gardner to Muslim to LGBT community to violence against women, to praise him like this is wrong. It is both wrong and also shows why we need new leadership in the Democratic Party. To me, Chuck Schumer is part of the problem. I'm not saying he's a Republican. No, he's not. He's a center-left guy on issues, much better than a Republican. But I'm saying we need real leadership. And you don't praise and you don't whitewash bigotry and racism. And that's what Chuck Schumer did. And that's what's so upsetting to me, that you're going to whitewash it. You should not. You can say nothing. I would not say a thing if Chuck Schumer did not condemn Pete King, but you're going to tweet this garbage? Come on. We got to be better than that. And we have to hold our elected officials better. And these guys have to wake up. The people in Congress have been there forever. That the old days are gone and the new days are here. And the new days demand that not just you progressive credentials, but you don't whitewash garbage because you share a seat on the Amtrak Acela with somebody or you fly across the country because you are whitewashing hate. So Peter King, good riddance, buddy. And we're going to try to help. There's one Democrat had announced a few weeks ago or a few months ago, we're going to try to have her on. She's African-American councilwoman from Long Island area, that district. Last election, he only won by 52%. It's certainly in play now with an open seat. So I think the best way to show Peter King that his views are no longer accepted by America is to flip that seat and make it a blue seat. And we're going to do what we can to help that Democrat. So look, I'd love to hear what you think about this. I mean, you're my guest at the top of the hour. You want to talk about other issues with impeachment? I'm very happy to talk about that. Obviously, all week we're going to be drilling down on impeachment in great detail. But am I being too hard on Chuck Schumer? Is it okay just to be a nice guy when someone's leaving? It's not like Peter King died. If Peter King had died, I'm not wishing that. I'm saying if he had died and you would say, I don't want to say anything bad about someone who died, I could sort of get that. This is not. He's just resigned. He's retiring. He's had enough. He's spewed hate and bigotry for 28 years, and he's moving on. He made the life of the Muslim community much harder than it had to be in this country, and he paved the way for anti-Muslim bigotry to be used by Herman Cain, Newt Gingrich, then Ben Carson, and Donald Trump. So, goodbye and good riddance, Peter King. So let's take a break, come back. I'd love to hear from you. 866-997-4748. Got a lot to cover. There was some more impeachment testimony released today. I'll get into that in the next hour. But I'd love to hear from you right now. You're my guest.
The Dean Obeidallah Show.
Voting is